Hey you, this is Jasim from Codeband, and in this video we are going to be talking about the custom user model in Django. So we'll be overriding the default username based authentication to an email based authentication, or you could say a phone number based authentication. So if you haven't subscribed my channel yet, please do subscribe my channel and click the bell icon near to it. So without any further, let's jump right into it. Alright guys, so we'll be starting right from the scratch itself. So I have created a new Django project here. I have my virtual environment activated, and one thing to note is that we'll be following this sort of guide that I have prepared, and this is a kind of GitHub repository with a readme in it. We'll have everything in detail, what and all things we have to do, we have to override. Everything is detailed, and I'll put the link in the description section so that you could of course follow along. So we'll start off with this one, the project setup. So the first thing you have to do is make a separate application, right? So we'll manage the accounts related things, or the registration, login, and all those stuff in a separate application. So we'll name that as account. So I'll create a new app. So python manage.py startup accounts. Now the name is up to you. You can of course do whatever you want, but the convention is to use accounts, and we'll create that one. Now we'll add that accounts in the settings.py install app section. So accounts there. Now with that being said, everything is perfect. Now we'll override the default user model. So in the accounts models.py in here, we'll make a class and we'll name this as custom user, which will be the overridden version of the default user model. So this one extends from the base user model. So there is something called the I believe it's in the readme here. I have that in here, base, I believe this one, class custom user, which inherits from the abstract user. So I'll just copy and paste this stuff here, and I'll explain what it is, and I'll just paste that. Now the abstract user, first of all I'll import that, and if we just hold the control and click that abstract user, you can find the code behind that. You can see that there is the username. It is nothing but the default implementation, which has the username, first name, last name, email, and all those fields there. So we need that because we want the default functionality, plus we also want that additional email or phone number functionality as well. So what we have done so far is we have created a custom user which inherits from abstract user, and in here we have already seen that we have the username field, right? So we don't want that username field, so we set that to none here. Now you can see that we have that email field right there. So why do we explicitly set that it again here? So that's because the email field here is not unique, and it is also a blank field. It can be blank, right? So we don't want that functionality so we overrided that to be the email to be unique, and it is not also blank. So that's why we overrided that email here. Now if you're using a kind of phone number authentication, the process is very simple. Just get rid of that email, put in phone, and just get rid of this email to be phone, and do some validators and all. That's it, the same procedure. Now the next thing is username field. Now that's nothing but when Django tries to log you in, which means at the time of logging a user, Django uses the username field to authenticate. So the default implementation, again, if you look into the code there, it is username. So now we don't have username, we'll use email. Now again, if it was phone, you can just use phone there. Now the required fields, as you can see in here, is email. This is a kind of thing that we use when we try to create a super user. So if we say python manage.py super user, then you will be asked to enter the email, right? So that's because the required fields is set there as email. Now the username field by default is mandatory, it cannot be blank. plus whatever we set in required fields will also be mandatory. So in this default implementation, it will be like username and email, but in our case it will be like we have that email field, right? So that's the default username field, which is mandatory by default, plus we don't want any additional fields to be required, so we just did this with empty list. That's it. Now if you're using a phone number, just replace that with phone as well. Now the next thing is the user manager. So as you can see in the code base, the default manager is yeah, this one, the user manager. So if we just hold the control and click on this one, you can see that there are a couple of things there, create users, a couple of methods and all. So that's the default one. You can see that username and all here. So at present we don't have that username field, so we need to make our own manager so that we could override the kind of username and all. So that's why I have created a custom user manager. So we haven't created, we have just specified that. We'll now create that custom user manager. So back into the readme here, I have already prepared that there, so I'll just copy and paste, and I'll explain that in a minute. So we'll just paste that there, and we'll also get this imports there up at the top. So I'll just import that, and that's it. Now what this does is in the default user manager, you can see that we have a couple of methods like create user, create super user. Now we'll just override that. Actually this is the same exact code. We are using the same things, we're just copying and pasting the same thing, same implementation, but with the exception of no username field. So instead of this username in the default one, we don't have that, we just have the email field there. Now this email field will be automatically passed to us because that's the username field we have set there. So and also additionally, if we have some other required fields, then that should be also being passed to this function there. So with that being said, now what we will possibly do is actually everything other implementation is the same. Now we don't have a phone field here, so we'll get rid of this one. Now the email, you can see email is equal to email instead of this default username is equal to username, and everything is very similar. We just create a user and that's it. Now every other implementation is just the same. So this is nothing but creating, we have the create user method right in the user model, and we have the create super user method there. So just the sort of things you can understand by just crawling over there. So that's it. Now as always, if this was a kind of phone field, then you can of course use this instead of email, you would receive that phone and you can set email to phone. That's it. Now with that being said, everything is perfectly fine. Now the last thing we have to do is in the settings.py, we have to specify that we should use this custom user model instead of the default user model. So back again in the readme, you have that there. So just copy, just paste that. It's nothing but setting out the user model. We should set accounts dot custom user. Now accounts is the application name and custom user is the model name. As you can see, our model name is custom user. So with that being said, everything is perfect. Now if we try to actually make migrations and migrate, everything will be set. So I'll say make migrations. Now I'll be using the default SQLite database. Now everything will be perfect if you use other databases as well, and I'll just migrate that. Now everything is done. Now we'll just make a new user so that we can log into the admin panel. So create a super user, and if you look into that, it asks for email address, not a username. Now that's because of the username field here. So everything is perfect. I'll say admin at admin.com, and a password to be admin, and I'll just bypass that validation. So super user is created successfully. Now we'll just run the server. So python manage .py run server. So we'll wait a minute there, and that's it. We got that. We'll go to /admin. Now we'll just log with that admin.com. And as you can see, we don't have that default user there. That's because we have overridden it to be custom user model, so we need to add that in the admin.py. So in the admin.py, we'll just for the time being add admin.site.register. Now in the default case, we actually use the user model, right? Wherever we want to use the user model, we just say user and we'll just import the default this one, the default model. But in our case, we don't use this one. Instead we use the custom user model. So in order to refer that, all you have to do is you have a couple of options. Like there is a method called get user model, so you can use this one. So I'll just import this one, and this would work fine. This would actually take that custom user model. Or also you can use something like the settings dot the custom or this one, the settings dot auth user model. So you could of course use setting dot auth user model. Both are permissible. You can of course just get user model or this one, which will work perfectly fine. So I'll stick with the get user model so that we just register that there. Now with that being said, if we look back into the admin panel, we got that users there. Now if you click that, you can see that we have one user, the admin at admin.com, but you can see that it is a bit ugly, right? You can see that it's not actually the default implementation you see here, because the password is just right in here. We don't have that change form here in order to change the password. Then these are turned upside down. The email address is at the bottom and all. So we'll just tweak this behavior so that it looks clean. So back into the readme here, I have prepared a kind of implementation, or inherited the default one and overridden with the custom user admin. So I'll just copy this one and I'll explain in a minute. So in the admin.py, I'll just replace that. Now in here, what I have done is in order to actually override the default behavior of this one, we can use something like the user admin will inherit from the user admin and we'll make a custom user admin. Now the field sets is something like the display fields, right? So whatever in here, so password, this is just no headers and all. It's just whatever in that model. So we have made in such a way that it looks exactly the same way as if in the default user model. So we have the personal info section where we'll have first name, last name. Then we'll have permissions, we'll have important dates. Everything is in much like in the default implementation. Now we also have the add field set, which is nothing but when we try to add a new user. So that's where we'll be crazy. So if I go to the previous one, and you can actually see when we try to add a new user, then it's kind of crazy thing happening here. No password, you can see the password, it's not dotted, then it's kind of very ugly. So that's why we have overridden this one to be the add field set here, so which looks crazy. So email, password 1 and password 2, you'll find that it's much like to the default implementation. Now the list displays nothing but it'll have the email field and phone number field right in here in the display section. Then search bar will be there and the ordering will be based on the email. So that's a kind of implementations we have done. Now if you just refresh this page, you can see that it's looking much cleaner, much like the default one. If you go to admin at admin.com, the user, it's now the default implementation. You can of course change the username, and you got that the basic one, the default one as well. Now if you try to create a new user, you can see that it's again the default one. Entering email address, password confirmation will make a new user. Now one thing you can see that this one, enter a username and password, we don't have actually that username field, we have that email field. Now in order to get override this one, we actually need to override the template, because this is at the end the add user template being rendered here. So we'll just override that. So back into the readme here, up at the bottom you can see that the add form template we want to override. So we'll make that templates directory, that template. So in the accounts, new, and in here I'll make the templates folder admin, and that I'll copy that path there and I'll just enter, so that it created those directories and add form.html. Now if we just click on this template here, you can see the default Django template being rendered. So I'll just copy that and I'll just paste. Now I'll just get rid of this username, enter an email and password, and the same thing here, enter an email and password. Now that will do the trick. So I'll just go back to the readme itself. Now I'll just refresh this one, and you can see that I believe that's not done yet. That's because I believe templates admin, auth user, add form, everything is perfect, but why, I don't know. We'll just restart the server there and we'll just refresh. I know we are not getting that. So the kind of issue I was facing was a kind of template priority there. So what I have done is what I'm gonna be doing is I'll just cut this templates directory from the accounts application, and I'll just paste that at the outer level, and at here you can see that. Now we'll add that in the settings.py. So in the directories we'll just say os.path.join base there and the templates directory. So with that being said, now one thing we have to do is in the add form.html we will just get rid of this translate there. So we'll get everything there, we'll drop everything there. So with this being said, if we just refresh, we got that stuff there, enter an email and password. So that's totally working fine. So the next thing we are going to be doing is a kind of registration form and a login URL as well. So we'll start off with the registration. So I'll go to the urls.py in the root urls.py, and in here I'll add a new path. So I'll just say register, and we'll just go to the views dot register. I'll make a view there, so I'll put name is equal to register as well. So we'll import this views. The import is accounts views. Now in here in the accounts views we'll make a new view. Now back to the readme, I have created a views.py here. The code is there. I'll just explain that. Now it's nothing but a kind of registration. So we'll get rid of this form and all. So we'll actually, you know, there is a default user creation form built into Django. So in normal cases, if you use the default authentication system, we kind of use this user registration default form there. So we'll shift that logic to user creation form. Now this is nothing but the same logic with whenever a GET request, it will just show you the register.html page. Otherwise, if it is post, it will just save that user there. So I'll create a register.html page in the accounts template. So I'll make templates folder, then I'll say register.html, and the register.html will just display that form there. So up at the bottom I have that code there, so I'll just copy and I'll just paste that. Now in here everything is perfect, right? So if we look into the slash register page, you can of course see that it is the default one with the username and password. We have left the username, but it still shows the username. Now that's because if we just hold down control and click on the user creation form, this is the default implementation there. So we have that in the class meta, we have the fields to be username, we have the model to be the old user model. So we need to get override that so that we have that email based authentication or registration. So in order to do that, I'll just create a new forms.py which will make a custom form. Now again we have that code base in here. So in the forms.py I'll just copy this one. Now I'll explain what it is in a minute. So it's nothing but a custom form inheriting the user creation form. We'll just override the meta class there, the model to be our own model, the custom model, and the fields we have that email field there. So with that being said, now if we go back into the register form there. Actually we didn't get rid of this one, so we'll now say in the forms.py, this name will say this name, so views will say, instead of user creation form, our own custom form. I'll just import that up at the top, and if we go into here, you can see that now it is kind of email address, so that's totally working fine. Now we can actually register a new user, so I'll say admin2 at admin.me. now I'll make a password there, so there will be that sort of validations and all. Yeah, the passwords didn't match actually, so I'll write a password there, and if we submit, actually it redirected to the same page, because after successfully saving the register model, the user model, it'll just redirect it to the register page. So if you look into the users column there, we'll see that admin2 there, so you can actually see that admin2. So that's totally working fine. Now the last thing we have to refactor is the login form actually. So the login form, if we actually in the readme itself, I have included the URL path there. Just copy that path, which will actually do the magic for us, which means we'll get all those kind of login, password reset, and all those URLs and views there. So this one expects the login page to be in a path. Now if we go to /account/login, you can actually see that error because we don't have that registration login.html template. So we'll make, in the templates directory, we'll make a new file in the registration directory. So that's perfect. Now we'll just copy and paste the same logic here, and in the register.html we'll just paste that, and if we just refresh, we got that email address and password. That's because the username field is email address there. So we can actually log a user in. So we'll just log in with the admin2 there, and I'll just log out from the admin panel, and I'll say admin2 at admin.me, and we'll just provide the password, and if I submit, it actually logs me in and it redirected to account/profile. Now that's the default kind of behavior, because after successful login, it will automatically redirect me to account/profile. Now in order to get this one, in order to verify that this is working, actually I'll make this register view as a login required decorator. Means only logged in people can see the register page actually. So in the views.py, I'll put login required decorator there. So I'll say login required, and I'll just import that. Now if we actually go to this register page, I believe I haven't imported that. Yeah, I have imported that, and yeah, we actually we are logged in, right? So that's why it's showing this page. Now if we actually log out by saying account/logout, and if we come back to this /register page, we cannot actually go into there because it says after logging in only you should access that. Now if we try to log in with that admin2 again, we can actually see that that's totally working fine. Believe I have, yeah, that's totally working fine. So that's all about the customizing the kind of default authentication model. So we have done so far, we have done everything, every single step where we have to override the username behavior. So I believe this is the end of the video, and if you have any doubts or any errors, please let me know in the comment section. Otherwise, if you like the video, please hit the thumbs up button. So if you haven't subscribed my channel yet, please do subscribe my channel and click the bell icon near to it. So thank you for watching. We'll see you in the very next one.